The woods behind my house were always my own. They were a quiet place, a place of peace. I walked there every day. The trees knew me. The path knew my feet. It was a familiar comfort, a silent friend I could always turn to when the world became too loud. I knew every twist of the trail, every fallen log, every patch of sunlight that broke through the canopy of leaves above. The air always smelled of damp earth and pine needles, a clean and honest smell. It was a place where nothing bad could happen. It was my sanctuary, a small piece of the world that belonged only to me, or so I had foolishly believed. But that Tuesday was different. The air was heavy, it was thick and still, holding its breath. The usual scent of pine was gone. In its place was something else, something sweet. It was a cloying sweetness, like flowers left to rot in a vase for far too long. It clung to the back of my throat, a sickly perfume that did not belong amongst the clean smells of the forest. I tried to ignore it, to push on past it. I thought perhaps an animal had died somewhere deep in the brush. Animals die, I told myself. It is the way of things. Nature can be cruel, but it is never malicious. I walked further, but the smell only grew stronger. It was wrong. It was a deeply, profoundly wrong smell. It seemed to coat everything. The leaves on the ground, the bark of the trees, the very air I was trying to breathe. My steps slowed. My heart began to beat a little faster, a nervous little bird trapped in my ribs. The woods were no longer friendly. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was watchful now. It was waiting for something. A cold dread began to creep up my spine, a feeling that I was not alone, and that whatever was with me was the source of this terrible, sweet decay. The familiar path seemed to change before my eyes. The trees leaned in, their branches like grasping fingers. The shadows deepened, hiding things I did not want to see. I should have turned back then. I should have run from that place and never returned. Any sensible person would have fled. But a terrible curiosity, a morbid pull, kept my feet moving forward. I had to know what was causing that awful, sickeningly sweet smell. I had to see the source of the wrongness that had invaded my peaceful woods. So I pressed on, deeper into the growing dark, drawn by the sweet smell of death. I found her near the old creek bed. The sweet smell was overwhelming here. It was a thick, tangible cloud. She was lying against the trunk of a great oak tree, as if she had simply sat down to rest and never gotten up again. Her head was tilted to one side, her long dark hair spread out like a fan against the rough bark. She wore a simple white dress, now stained and discolored by the earth and the rain. From a distance, she could have been sleeping. It was a strangely peaceful image, a quiet moment of repose. But the stillness was too absolute, the silence around her too profound. There was no life here. As I drew closer, the piece shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Her skin was pale, waxy, and stretched too tightly over her bones. It had a bluish tint in the dim light of the forest. Her eyes were open. They were wide and staring, but they saw nothing. They were milky and vacant, fixed on some distant point in the branches above. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she were about to speak a word that never came. A small dark stain marred the front of her white dress, right over her heart. It was the only sign of violence on her still and composed body. A single perfect wound. I could not look away. I was frozen to the spot, my mind struggling to comprehend what my eyes were seeing. This was not a sleeping woman. This was a body. This was what remained of a person. The air was thick with the evidence of her decay, a scent that I would never forget. It was the smell of life gone wrong, of something beautiful turned to ruin. Her hands were folded delicately in her lap, her fingers long and slender. She wore a simple silver ring on one finger. It was a small human detail that made the scene all the more horrifying. She had been a person, with a life and hopes. I finally stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. I turned and ran. I did not look back. I fled from the clearing, from the oak tree, from the woman in the white dress. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, but I could not escape the image of her vacant eyes. I could not escape the memory of her still, pale face. And most of all, I could not escape the smell. It followed me out of the woods. It clung to my clothes and my hair. It was a haunting perfume that lingered long after I had slammed and locked my front door, a sweet, terrible reminder of what the woods now held. Sleep did not come easily after that day. When it finally did, it was not a refuge. It was a continuation of the horror. My dreams were filled with the woods. I walked the same path over and over, the sweet smell growing stronger with each step. In my dreams, I would find her again. But this time she would not be still. Her milky eyes would turn to look at me. Her pale lips would move, though no sound would come out. Sometimes she would lift a hand and point a long, slender finger directly at me. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the phantom smell of decay filling my bedroom. The days were no better. My house, once a place of safety, now felt strange and unwelcoming. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every shadow in the corner of my eye seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. I started hearing things. A soft whisper, like the rustling of dry leaves, would come from an empty room. I would catch a faint trace of that sweet floral scent in the hallway, only for it to disappear when I tried to find its source. I was living on a knife's edge, constantly tense, constantly waiting for something to happen. The house was no longer mine. I stopped going into the woods. I avoided the windows that looked out onto the trees. But it did not matter. The woods had come into my house with me. The haunting was not out there. It was in here. It was inside my head. I would be washing dishes and suddenly feel a cold spot in the air beside me, as if someone were standing right there. I would see a flicker of movement in the reflection of the window, a pale shape that vanished when I turned around. I was becoming a stranger in my own home, a nervous guest who was afraid to make a sound. My friends told me I was in shock. They said it was trauma. They used clinical, sensible words to explain away the fear that was consuming me. They told me to see a doctor, to talk to someone. I tried to believe them. I wanted to believe them. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a natural reaction to a horrific discovery. But their logical explanations could not account for the cold I felt. They could not explain the whispers in the empty rooms, or the sweet smell of death that would appear and disappear without reason. It was more than shock. Something had followed me home. The police came and went. They asked their questions and I gave my answers. They were polite and professional. They used words like victim and investigation. They removed the body from the woods, taping off the area around the old oak tree. For a while there was an official presence that kept the strangeness at bay. But soon, the tape was taken down, and the woods were left alone once more. They told me the case was ongoing, but they never found out who she was or what had happened to her. She became a ghost in a file, a nameless woman found in the woods. But for me, she was much more than that. The strange occurrences in my house did not stop. If anything, they became more frequent, more personal. The whispers grew clearer, almost sounding like my name on the wind. The cold spots became more intense, raising goosebumps on my arms in the middle of a warm room. One evening, I came downstairs to find the silver ring I had seen on her finger sitting on my kitchen table. It was just sitting there, gleaming in the low light. There was no explanation for how it got there. I never touched it. I was too afraid. I left it where it lay, a silent, terrifying offering from an unseen guest. I live with a constant sense of being watched. It is a heavy weight on my shoulders, a pressure at the back of my neck. I am never truly alone. She is here, in the shadows, in the silence, in the cold spots in the air. I don't know what she wants from me. Perhaps she wants nothing. Perhaps my presence is just an anchor for her, the last person who saw her as she was. I have considered moving, selling the house, and running far away from here. But I have a terrible feeling that it would not matter. This is not about the house or even the woods. This is about me. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the world is asleep, I can still smell it, the faint sweet scent of decay. It is a reminder that she is still here with me. It is a promise that I am not forgotten. I no longer fight it. I no longer try to explain it away. I have come to accept this haunting as a part of my life. I found her in the woods that day, and in doing so, I tied myself to her forever. The door between our worlds was opened, and I am beginning to fear that it will never be closed again. The haunting continues. It always will.